How does a shy child from Long Beach end up fighting on Asia's biggest MMA stage? After high school, Sovannahry Em began training in boxing and martial arts. Initially focused on fun and fitness, she quickly caught the eye of professional promoters. After winning her first few pro fights in dramatic fashion, Sovannahry boarded a plane for Malaysia and entered the cage as a one championship athlete. Sovannahry is currently taking a break from her MMA career, but hopes to one day represent her Khmer heritage on the international stage as a member of Team Cambodia.
Hey, what's up, guys? Coach Ndeka here with another episode of C4 Podcast, Southeast Asian Athlete Achievement Through Adversity. I'm here with my co-host, John Messina. We have an amazing guest on tonight, a female MMA fighter, pro. So something you don't hear too much about, especially in our Asian culture. You don't hear too much about women like fighting or anything like that, right? So it's quite unique. If you guys haven't already, please like and share our page, follow us on Instagram, follow us on Facebook. And if you guys have any suggestions on someone else that you would think would love to share their story, please message us. All right. Without further ado, here is my co-host, John.
So we are very excited about today's guest because she came out of a suggestion from a listener. We thank you for that. We've actually gotten a couple requests to interview somebody who's fought in one championship. Because for those of you who don't know who one championship is, it's basically I call the Asian equivalent of the UFC. It's headquartered out of Singapore. It's a very big up and coming promotion. I personally think it could surpass the UFC at some point because they just have some incredible athletes that they pulled together. The way they put on their shows and stuff, it's honestly more entertaining, I think, in some cases. But anyway, it is right up there with the UFC as far as promotions go. As far as I'm concerned, if you listen to our episode with Andre Sukumtat, who fought in the UFC, he actually said one of his bucket list things was to be in one championship, perhaps because it's that big, especially in the Asian area, Eastern world there. But before we jump into the interview with Sovannahry Em, couple of announcements here. One, first of all, our hearts go out to everybody who was impacted by the devastating Maui fires. Our own Nara Sihavong, you may remember him from episode 18, and you probably saw him as part of our athlete contingent going to the SEA Games in Cambodia this last year. He was a wrestling coach, and his own son, Dawson, Stanford wrestler, was there, brought home both bronze and silver medals in two different classes of wrestling. Nara's on the ground in Hawaii right now. He's volunteering with the Red Cross. He's pulling the community together. He's actually getting ready to host between 35 and 50 families on his land potentially. He's made it available to the Red Cross should they need it. He's also working with a group called High Sessions, a musician group in Hawaii that's been doing fundraisers. So if you want to help, we posted on the Lao American Sports Facebook page. There's 3 charities that Nara and that team have partnered with. One is, of course, the Red Cross of Hawaii, the Maui Food Bank, and the Hawaii Community Foundation has set up a Maui Strong Fund. So these are all charities that they've vetted and feel confident in putting their names behind. So check out the Facebook post we did on that. And if you so want to help, please help that team out. They're doing a lot of work. Nara's been working around the clock for the disaster relief. So with that, we're going to jump into the interview here with Sovannahry. She comes to us out of Southern California, grew up primarily in Long Beach, Khmer American MMA fighter, as Co said. So Sovannahry, welcome to the show. We're going to start off, if you could just tell us a little bit about your family's background from Cambodia and them, how they came to the U.S. and so forth.
Sure. So I don't know much about my father's side, but my mom, she was born in 1972, and of course she was forced out of her home. Her whole family was forced out of her home in 1976 because of the whole thing with the Khmer Rouge. And yeah, she's had some wild stories during that period. Just insane experiences that it's just so funny when I ask her about her stories, her escaping that period. Just the violence that she witnessed at such a young age that I'm able to talk to her, and she's such a sweet woman. And she seems like really, she just seems so normal and so sweet. But yeah, yeah, it wasn't until 84, when she was about 11 years old, that she made it to the States with her family. Um, yeah, that's pretty much, yeah. So she was a kid during that period, and then 11 when she made it to the States, and then, lots of adjusting. She didn't know the language, your typical stuff, just getting uh, accustomed to a new culture, a new country. Um, it was, yeah, it was interesting for her and her sisters. Uh, I mean, so many things so many things I can get into. But yeah, and then around 19, she had me, and by the age of 21, she was raising two kids on her own. So that's
Yeah.
where.
So, folks, we interviewed several people that, Kenya Prach, um, the Bokator and Kun Kamai master, as well as Leth Own, the Secret Service agent. Both Leth and Kenya have books. Kenya's is Blackstone Hands. Leth is this one right here, Refugees American Dream. They were older than Sovannahry's mom, so they have vivid memories of the situation. If you're interested in hearing more, please grab one of their books. They talk about basically a similar story to your mom. So, folks, grab one of those books if you want to dig into that in more detail. Did your mom grow up in Long Beach, or where did she grow up in the U.S.?
So initially they were sponsored by a family. So when they left Cambodia, they ended up in Idaho.
Oh,
And then, yeah, then eventually, like many Cambodian families, they heard that there was a large population of Cambodians in Long Beach, California. So they eventually made their way to Long Beach.
okay. So she would have went through. There was a bit of a turbulent time there in the early '90s. She's about that age that she would have been probably right in the middle of that.
Yeah.
Just based on her age, folks, with some gangs and things, it's completely changed and died down there. It's now, but at that time there was I don't know, maybe 5 or 10 years that it was a little rough. We've had other guests on who've talked about that as well. But so getting to you, Sovannahry, thanks for that backstory. So tell us about your childhood, where you grew up, and what it was like.
Uh, so I was born in Long Beach, and well, like I said, so my mom and my father separated when I was very young, maybe 2, 3, 4 years old. And so my mom was a working single mother. So I mean, for us as kids, it was totally fun because she would just take us to our grandparents' house, and we'd be taken care of by grandma, grandpa, our uncles and aunties, and totally fine. But talking to her now, it was a struggle for her to always have to find someone to take care of her babies. So it's just interesting to get that perspective as an adult. Um, but yeah, because she was a single mother, there would be long periods where mom would be away and we'd have no idea where she is, when she's going to be back. Um, and then, it was interesting because eventually she ended up with a long-term partner, and then we would have, I would have two more siblings from that partner. Um, so he would be taking the primary caretaker of us while my mom was away for like, weeks at a time. Um, and during this period, my mom was making pretty good money. So we had a pretty like lavish lifestyle for a period. And then there would be periods where we were just like, she was struggling to like buy an apple to feed us. So like lots of highs and lows, which again, I didn't know about this until I was an adult. Like she did a pretty good job of keeping that from us. Like we didn't feel hungry at all. So, but yeah, I mean, again, as a child, I felt like my child was perfectly fine. I was happy. But then talking to my little brother, I'm the oldest of the four of us. Uh, and then also looking back, just at at his behaviors and some things like that, it was really rough because we were moved around quite a bit. And there was a long period where we left California where the majority of our family is like my grandma, grandpa, uh, everything, like all my whole Khmer family side was in California. But we had to kind of like, eventually my mom relied on her partner for our financial situation. So we had to follow wherever he could find work, which led us to being like in Wyoming and Idaho for periods of time. So big change, big, hard to adapt for some kids, particularly my brother. He had a really rough time because he felt very close with my family, whereas I did too. But I think, and I think it still carries into my personality now. I was just always kind of like go with the flow, but like any other normal kid, it was a rough transition, constantly moving schools and being that far away from home. Um, so yeah, eventually, uh, during high school age, I ended up back in Long Beach with my mom and brother, and it was good. Got to give back to family, eating grandma's cooking, and that's fantastic. Let's see, and then I'm not sure where I want to go from there. Yeah, yeah, that's pretty much our childhood. Lots of moving around, lots of highs and lows, but like I said, I didn't really feel it that much. I feel like I was a pretty happy kid.
So tell us that led you into martial arts, or how you ended up getting into martial arts.
So my brother and I, our whole family actually was always into, just always fascinated by it. We would watch like Jackie Chan and Jet Li, Bruce Lee films, and play video games like Street Fighter, Mortal Kombat, and we were always imitating our favorite fighters, and we would play fight, and that's kind of like how we would play. Unfortunately, many of those play sessions would turn into real sessions because someone would make it a little too rough. But yeah, always into martial arts. And then my mother's partner, the father of my half siblings, was very much into UFC and Pride at the time. So we were very much exposed to mixed martial arts at a young age. Um, as much as we were into it, though, we were we didn't really have the means to be put into any official training. So we would just mess around at home and do whatever we could. It wasn't until I was 19, 20 years old that I first stepped into a boxing gym, and that was my introduction to any formal training. So that's how I got into like actual training. So I have a Western boxing background initially, and then after a couple of years of just doing that, initially just for fun, just for fitness, I started adding jujitsu to my background. And it was around this period that Ronda Rousey was making a big name in UFC. Liz Carmouche, like women's MMA was becoming much more prominent. And since I was doing so well in like local jiu-jitsu tournaments and boxing smokers, I figured this could be a path for me. Maybe it's something that I can be good at. So that's how we got it going.
Oh, exciting. So tell us about your early MMA career, because it's one thing to go to the gym and train. How did you start getting into competition? And then what was like the path to become a one championship athlete?
So I think my path was a little bit not very typical, I guess, because I didn't start with an amateur career. I went right into building my professional record. And it's just, I was able to meet different people because I was always trying to find a gym and a coach that would fit me. And I was fortunate to meet my first coach, Sean Loeffler, and he was in contact with some like lower level promotions, and that's how I got my two first pro fights in the organization called Gladiator Challenge. So I got my two first fights there, and I won them, I guess, in dramatic fashion. So, like knockouts in early rounds, and then
What year are we here? What year is this now? Like,
Uh, it was 2016 that I started
gotcha.
competing in MMA. Yeah. So it was about 4 years into my martial arts training, I guess. So very new. I knew very little
Yeah.
at that period. So yeah, after having two fights in Gladiator Challenge, eventually uh, I was able to, I was trying to figure out where I wanted to go with it. I tried out for the Ultimate, Tough, the Ultimate Fighter, the TV show.
Yeah, wow.
So I got to I got to go to Vegas and meet many other professional female athletes that I would potentially be fighting. So that was a really cool experience and kind of see where I'm at with my skills compared to theirs. And also at this time, one championship was becoming more of a well-known thing. And I was like trying to figure out what route I wanted to go. And I figured, well, if I want to be fighting, it would be pretty cool if I can kind of make a name for myself in Southeast Asia. And that's where one championship is big. And I also liked their values and just the way they put on the show, everything about one. So that became more appealing to me. And fortunately, again, yeah, my manager at the time was able to put me in touch with one, and that's how I was able to make my way.
Wow. So tell us about stepping into the ring for the first time in a one championship bout. How did you feel? The emotional side of it, and then tell us about the fight and how it went.
Yeah, so I wasn't sure how it was gonna go because one, I'd never traveled to Asia before, so you're dealing with a like 20-hour plus flight across the world to a country. My first fight for one was in Malaysia. So, I'm not sure what the language barrier situation is going to be. Lots of unknowns, but again, I think it's just my tendency to kind of like be excited by these types of things. So it was more exciting than anything. And also we arrive and we have 1 week of fight week where we just kind of like stay there and work off the rest of our weight. We're doing like press stuff or whatever. And every now and then my coach and I would get to go and like explore the country a little bit. So it was really cool. Let's see. Big learning curve. Like we had to, I don't know if you guys know one has a big no cutting water rule. So that was something that we had to kind of like figure out, which it was a little hard at first, but we managed. My coach is a pro. He's really cool. He's really good at this. Very, very mellow and everything always works out. But I realized very quickly I can't be walking around like the food street vendors. Like it's way too distracting. I actually had a fight during the pandemic, and that was like the best situation because we had to stay in our hotel room, and the weight cut was like so easy, and obviously because I wasn't fooling around. But first time stepping in again, I was just very excited. Which is funny because like I'm a very kind of quiet, shy introvert, and I don't really like feel the need for like a lot of attention on me. But when I was in it, it was very very exciting to be on that big stage, and also it was very cool because I was on the card. There was another Khmer fighter on the same card as me, Chan Ratana. So I met him and his team, which was amazing. And through this whole thing, through being part of one championship and meeting these other Khmer fighters, now I have like a connection to people in Cambodia that I would have never ever had before this opportunity. So I'm still friends with I don't speak with Chan as much because of the language barrier. My Khmer isn't good enough, but certainly like parts of his team. And I met my Khmer language teacher through one of his coaches. So many amazing things came out of that experience. But stepping into the cage, I keep getting off track. But yeah, it was amazing. One of the pictures of me walking out for the first time, there's a huge smile on my face. It's just a buzz. And everyone's just so receptive there, so supportive, and yeah, just felt really good. I won that fight by TKO, so it all went well.
Yeah.
What was your record when you were competing in one? And did you fight for any championships, any titles?
No, I didn't get many fights. I'm kind of taking a kind of a break from competing at the moment, but I had a total of I always forget this number. I'm 5-1.
Wow.
No,
Awesome.
4-1. Yeah, 4-1.
Somewhere around there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah. So won 2 fights in one championship and lost one.
Okay. Yeah.
And all the fights, because of one, all the fights were in Southeast Asia. There weren't any where you were stateside, meaning you living in the States always had to travel to these fights, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, that'd be hard. And that takes, just the travel in itself, and, getting familiar with the area and the food and all that stuff. That's a challenge already, so.
Yeah, hoping not to get sick and things. We dealt with it at the SEA Games, all the athletes that came with us to go to the SEA Games in Cambodia, it was a challenge. I will say, though, the plane was full of athletes coming to represent pretty much every country. So we weren't the only ones with that challenge. There were athletes from the Philippines, Malaysia, Singapore, Cambodia, Laos, everybody on that plane going over. But it was certainly a concern and a challenge adapting time zone, jet lag, worried about getting sick, all of that kind of stuff. And then you have to try to compete at your best. It's really not easy at all. Yeah.
The jet lag. We arrive and we pretty much relax, but by the next day, even though I want to sleep because it's like 2 a.m. my time, my coach is like, all right, we got to go train. So yeah, jumping right into it because we got to be ready. We got to be adjusted by the time fight night comes.
Yeah. So tell us about your style, because MMA is unique. Some people lean on different martial arts more than others. Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu seems to be the thing that is sort of leading now. I'm not a huge, person who watches it, but from what I see, but what's your kind of mix?
So initially, again, because I have a Western boxing background and Mike Tyson was a huge influence for me. Initially, it was just the stand-up, the striking. I want to be able to stay on the feet and have just enough wrestling to just keep it on the feet. But eventually that had to change because my wrestling was minimal. And if people were having trouble with me on the feet, they could just take it to the ground in an instant. So eventually I was training more wrestling, becoming more jiu-jitsu based, and so still able to keep my striking background, but creating situations where I can do it more effectively by wrestling to take it down, take my opponent to the ground and strike him from there. So that's why my previous fights that I've won would end by TKO, but it would be from a pinned position. I would have my opponent in a pin and landing strikes from there.
Okay. And then tell us a little bit about your training, and especially when you go into camp, sort of your regiment, maybe.
So that's kind of a big reason why I've had to take a step back, is because I've moved even further away from my main training gyms, I guess. Where I was living before, when I was in LA, it was hard then because I had to drive to San Diego often in order to get good sparring rounds, basically, because that's where many other professional women athletes my size that's where they were training. And I come from my coach, I'm pretty much his only athlete, so we had to travel to other gyms to get sparring in. So pretty pretty solid regiment between getting my skills training in with my coach and then driving down and staying a few days at a time or so to San Diego to get my training with the women there. But now that I've moved further away, there was a period where I was still trying that, and it was working out for a while, but man, the hours on the road is, man, it's no joke.
No, it's California traffic.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, it's rough. So yeah, whenever I do decide to get back into competing, I'd have to figure out that situation where I'm just local, or figure out training here. But yeah, lots of traveling because, women athletes is not very common in at least where I'm at. So I can get some training, some sparring with men, but it's my coach thought it was best that of course, I go spar with other professional women.
Yeah, that's a great point. You need to find women that are at your level, at your size, right?
Yeah.
And that's not going to always be easy, especially if you're like in a way outlying suburb of LA or whatever.
Yeah.
Trying to find them.
Yeah.
But so what does it mean to kind of represent your Khmer heritage in the cage when you fight? Being a second generation, being really grown up in the US, but having the connection.
Like I said, like, yeah, because I'm Khmer American, when I was a kid growing up, I was very much surrounded by Khmer culture, the language, just by being around my family all the time. But as we started moving further and further away, like literally moving further away.
Yeah. Wyoming's not exactly the hotbed of Khmer culture.
Exactly. Yeah. In fact, after living in Wyoming for a few years, I came back to Long Beach and, having Khmer food, my grandma's Khmer food, after not having had it for years, I put on a good chunk of weight after that. So, but yeah, being Khmer American and and like there was a long period where I just kind of like accidentally just like separated myself from Khmer culture and just, lived your typical American lifestyle. I spoke the language when I was very little, but then lost it as I grew older. So yeah, it wasn't until I became an adult around, during the period where I was training, my partner's Italian, so I became very embedded in like, we would go back to his country to meet his family and stuff, and I learned a lot about like Italian culture, and it was really fascinating. And I saw some parallels with like Khmer culture, which I hadn't even thought about in years for whatever reason. And so I finally got like this newfound curiosity and fascination for getting back into my own culture and language. And so yeah, and fighting for one championship, it really provided me the opportunity to, like I said, like connect with people in Cambodia, which is like amazing. So yeah, that's been like one of the most rewarding things, being able to compete for one championship.
Yeah. Well, I could speak to that because I'm Italian and my wife's Lao. So like our wedding, you would have thought the families would be like oil and water, but our wedding was just like everybody together loving it. The cultures meshed really well. Maybe too much around the drinking side, but yeah, I know what you're saying there with the Southeast Asian and the Italian culture, how there's a good synergy there because I live it every day as well.
That's beautiful.
It is. It really is. Well, hey, I know you're a fighter and everybody loves to hear about that, but from what I saw, you're also a pretty cool artist. So there's like and these things don't usually go together. It's like you don't think of somebody who's in a cage beating somebody up, like being this artist. Tell us about that side of you as well.
Sure. So I think when people meet me and people who know me, it's like, they hear that I'm an artist. There's like, oh yeah, obviously. It's when I tell them that I'm a fighter, they're like, what?
Okay.
So yeah, I've always been very artistic ever since I was little. That's just always how I would spend my time, just by myself with my markers and pencils. And it's just how I like to relax. It's how I have fun. I actually got into fighting just to kind of like complement my more kind of like hermit
Mm.
side. Like just I'm just very shy again. Like um, so yeah, that's yeah. My RC side is kind of comes more natural to me. It's the fighting and dealing with like conflict. Those things are harder. I think that's why it affects my fight career a little bit
Mm.
because I just I'm not competitive enough. I feel too bad for my partners. I feel bad for my opponents. It's just hard, not just physically, but emotionally because it's just
Yeah.
very against my nature. So you can see in like my very first fight, after I get the knockout, I drop my opponent and I'm like walking up to her to check on her, and the ref is pulling me away, like "Get back, you
Yeah.
psycho!" But
I thought you were
it's
going to end it or
it's to finish
something.
it off.
Oh my God. Yeah.
But like I'll watch old like footage of my previous fights, and I'm just like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
So yeah, yeah, my art side is just like it's always been me. It's
So
the fight side that I'm kind of like trying to draw forth and just kind of like trying to round out my character, myself as a human
yeah.
being.
MMA is a tough sport. I mean, you see some of these fights with like fighters like Stamp Fairtex and
Yeah,
stuff like that. I mean, they can get brutal.
yeah,
And having the empathy for the other person's, obviously important, but there's like this balancing act, where
yeah.
it's really tough. But at the same time, you being kind of introverted, does that sort of maybe help you focus more than people who are all flashy and more they're trying to put on a show than think about the fight? I don't know.
I think so. I
Yeah.
think I was trying to kind of figure myself out during my fourth fight. I was trying to think. I was kind of like feeling like I don't fit into this martial arts world because I see many women or other fighters that are just like really aggro and it's
Yeah.
awesome, like really intense. And I'm like, man, I'm not that way. Maybe I'm not cut out for this. So I tried putting on that mask, I guess, which is what it turned out to be because I was trying to come in like aggro and aggressive and like think of a million reasons of why I should hate my opponent. and yeah, it actually stressed me out. I wasn't able to focus. Everything was just I went into that fight and just anxious, jittery, not like whereas normally I'm like happy, relaxed, um, I can focus better, things that I can slow things down. Whereas this was just like everything's going a million miles per hour, and I lost that fight. So I was like, yeah,
Uh,
that was a mistake. So I learned. Um,
well, yeah, the mental game, it's not everything. It looks like a physical game to those watching on TV, but to be honest, it's not. It's equally mental, right?
yeah,
Right.
For sure.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, cool. Well, Sovannarhry, so I know you kind of take a break from fighting and so forth, but what does the future hold? What are your goals in life? What are your goals with fighting? Where do you see yourself going?
Well, right now I'm having a lot of fun, just coaching, teaching, at a few different places. I recently just got a spot at Pepperdine University, so a local college. So I'm going to be a
Yeah.
faculty member at a university, which is kind of funny. Um, but lately I've been kind of having my eyes set on like, I saw the latest Sea Games was in Cambodia. I was like, wow, that would be really
I,
amazing if I can have some part in that, competing, coaching, anything. So that's kind of like if anything gets me out of like not competing, I think that may be something that may be worth getting back into it.
yeah, they don't have MMA, but they have BJJ and they have judo and they have wrestling even. So they have other
Oh,
sports in the Sea Games. The next one will be in Thailand, 2025. We're already starting to talk about our Lao American contingent and
cool.
rounding up rallying the troops to go over and make a good showing. It was the first time
Yeah.
for Laos that they invited American athletes back. Was the one in
Oh, wow.
Cambodia, and it was really exciting. And We had a great time. Cambodia is, I would say, ahead of the curve with their bringing back of athletes. But it was a great time in Cambodia. Cambodia did an awesome job putting on the SEA Games. I was overall extremely impressed. The country, there was this air of optimism. The amount of development in Phnom Penh, cranes and buildings going up, and just the energy of the people. I was honestly expecting it to be a little sleepier, kind of slower moving, slower developing. But you could see that they were on the up, and they put on the opening ceremony at the SEA Games was incredible. They did a great job with that, and it was overall a great experience. So yeah, I
Wow.
would certainly encourage you, if you ever get a chance to work with the Cambodia martial arts teams or be at a
Hmm.
SEA Games or something, whether it's
Yeah.
fighting or coaching, to do it,
Hmm.
because it was an awesome experience for us. Yeah.
Yeah, that
Uh,
sounds amazing.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, good. Well, Ko, anything else for Sovannarhry?
No, no. Great story. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing your experience as a mixed martial artist.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, so this was great, Sovannarhry. So everybody, that's it for the show today. Please like, follow, and share the show. If you're listening on Apple or Spotify, please go ahead and give us a 5-star review. We would definitely appreciate that. And for this week, we are out. Thanks. The C4 podcast is brought to you by the Lao American Sports Hall of Fame. Visit us on the web at laoamericansports.com, celebrating the first, inspiring the next.